The dream of the New World was not born of courage, it was born of desperation. It was a fever dream, whispered in the dark corners of overcrowded cities and on the barren soil of failing farms. It was the last desperate gamble of people who had nothing left to lose. Tonight, we will not tell a story of glorious adventure on the high seas. We will tell the story of the crossing. A claustrophobic 2-month nightmare in a wooden box, adrift on an endless ocean. A world of darkness, disease, and gnawing hunger, where the greatest enemy was not the storm or the sea monster, but the simple, crushing monotony of the passing days. This is the story of the hellish voyage that was the price of admission to the New World. Now, before we step onto the gangplank and leave the old world behind forever and you get comfortable for the night, if you enjoy this kind of immersive journey into the past, please take a moment to leave a like and to subscribe, but only if you genuinely find value in what we do here. And as always, I would love to know from what part of the world you are listening tonight and what time it is where you are. Feel free to leave it in the comments. It is a quiet fascination to see our community of night owls and history lovers spread across the globe. All right, the time has come. Find your most comfortable position. Dim the lights. Let the anxieties of the modern world fade away. And let us join a young man named Thomas in the bustling, filthy port of Bristol in the spring of the year 1635. He is about to make a choice that will seal his fate. Thomas stands in the shadow of a warehouse, the damp chill of the stone wall seeping into his thin wool coat. The air in the port of Bristol is a thick, soupy mixture of smells, the sharp, clean scent of sea salt, the cloying smell of tar and hemp from the shipyards, the stench of rotting fish from the docks, and the ever-present smoky haze of coal fires. His life in England has reached a dead end. The small farm his family once worked has been enclosed, swallowed by the estate of a wealthy lord. He came to the city hoping for work, but found only crowded tenements, low wages, and the constant hacking cough that comes from breathing the city's foul air. He is 20 years old, and he owns nothing but the clothes on his back and a desperate, gnawing hunger for something more than this slow, grinding poverty. That is when he first sees it. A piece of paper, a broadsheet nailed to a wooden post, fluttering in the damp sea breeze. It is a promotion and advertisement from a company of merchant adventurers. It speaks of a place called Virginia. It does not speak of hardship or danger. It speaks of opportunity. It speaks of abundant land, of vast forests teeming with game, of rivers so full of fish you can catch them with your bare hands. It is a carefully crafted fantasy, a beautiful lie printed in cheap black ink. And Thomas, in his desperation, chooses to believe it. The decision once made is a swift and brutal severing of his old life. He signs an indenture, a contract that binds him to 7 years of service in the New World. In exchange for his labor, the company will pay for his passage on their next ship. He has sold 7 years of his life for a ticket out of his own misery. He spends the next week gathering his meager possessions and waiting for the ship, the Sea Venture, to be ready to sail. He sleeps in crowded, lice-infested lodging houses near the docks, listening to the stories of other hopefuls and the grim warnings of old sailors who know the truth of the Atlantic crossing. They speak of storms that can snap a mast like a twig, of the dead calm that can leave a ship stranded for weeks until the water runs out, of the shipboard fevers that can turn a healthy man into a corpse in a matter of days. He listens, but he does not truly hear. His mind is fixed on the promise of Virginia.
The day of departure arrives. It is not a bright, sunny day of hopeful beginnings, but a gray, drizzling morning. The sky the color of dirty dishwater. The port is a chaotic mess of activity. Sailors shout from the rigging of tall ships, barrels and crates are being hauled up gangplanks, and the air is thick with a sense of urgency and departure. A clerk with an ink-stained ledger shouts your name. Thomas Miller. You step forward. He checks your indenture papers, his face impassive, and then gestures with his quill towards a ship moored at the end of the quay. "The Sea Venture," he says, without looking up. "Find your place. Don't be a nuisance." You see the ship properly for the first time. It is not the grand, majestic vessel you had perhaps imagined. It is a small, stout, and weather-beaten merchant ship. It looks less like an instrument of glorious exploration and more like a workhorse, a beast of burden for the sea. Its wooden hull is dark and slick with seawater, its masts tall but scarred, its sails patched and worn. It smells of tar, of damp wood, and of the faint, underlying odor of bilge water and old sickness. You join the slow-moving line of other indentured servants and colonists waiting to board. There are families with small, frightened children. There are young men like yourself, their faces a mixture of hope and trepidation. There are a few women traveling alone, their expressions guarded and wary. You are all bound together by a shared, desperate gamble. You walk up the steep, narrow gangplank, your small, lumpy bag slung over your shoulder. The deck of the ship is a controlled chaos of sailors coiling ropes, checking rigging, and shouting orders in language of the sea that you do not understand. An officer, a man with a hard, weather-beaten face, directs you and the other passengers not to the cabins you can see on the upper deck. Those are for the captain, the officers, and the few wealthy passengers, but to a dark, narrow hatchway in the center of the ship. "Down you go," he says, his voice impatient. "Find a space and stay there until we are at sea." You descend a steep ladder-like staircase into the gloom. The air changes instantly. The fresh, salty sea air is replaced by a thick, warm, and foul atmosphere. It is the smell of unwashed bodies, of stale food, of dampness, and of fear. This is the tween deck, the space between the main deck and the cargo hold. It is your home for the next 2 months. The space is impossibly small, a long, low-ceilinged cavern. The ceiling is so low that you cannot stand up straight, forced into a permanent, stooped posture. There is no light, save for the faint gray light that filters down from the open hatchway and a single swaying lantern that casts long, dancing shadows. Along the walls are rows of rough, wooden bunks stacked 3 high. They are little more than shelves, wide enough for a single body with no mattress, no bedding. You find an empty bunk on the lowest level, as far from the latrine buckets at the far end as you can get. The small, dark wooden shelf is your entire world. It is your bed, your dining table, your only private space. You sit down, the rough wood hard beneath you. You are one of perhaps 100 souls crammed into this dark, airless space. The sounds of the ship above, the shouting of the sailors, the creaking of the masts, are muffled, distant. Down here, the only sound is the nervous coughing and quiet, fearful whispers of your fellow passengers. The journey has not yet begun, but the reality of your situation is already becoming terrifyingly clear. For hours, you sit in the dim, oppressive twilight of the tween deck. The sounds from the world above are a chaotic symphony of departure. You hear the rhythmic creaking of the capstan as the sailors weigh anchor, their voices joined in a rough, grunting sea shanty to time their efforts. You hear the sharp, shouted commands of the captain, the frantic scampering of feet on the deck, and the great groaning snap of the sails as they catch the wind for the first time. Then you feel it. A slow, deep, lurching motion, a feeling of profound and unsettling movement, not on a road, but with the very world beneath you. The ship is moving. A new wave of emotion washes over the crowded space. Some people begin to pray, their voices a low, fearful murmur. Others, particularly the children, begin to cry. You feel a knot of cold, hard fear tighten in your stomach. There is no turning back now. You and a few other men, desperate for a final glimpse of the world you're leaving behind, make your way to the base of the ladder and climb back up onto the main deck. The sea air, though damp and gray, is a shocking, welcome relief after the stale air below. You rush to the side of the ship. The port of Bristol is already receding, the familiar shapes of its warehouses and church spires growing smaller, less distinct. The ship picks up speed, moving out of the harbor and into the open channel. You watch as the coastline of England, a jagged line of gray cliffs and green hills, slowly, inexorably pulls away from you. This is the last piece of your old life, the last familiar sight you will see for months, perhaps forever. You watch until the details blur, until the cliffs and hills merge into a single, dark, indistinct line on the horizon. You watch until that line itself becomes a faint gray smudge. And then you watch until it is gone, swallowed by the vast gray emptiness of the sea and the sky. A profound and overwhelming sense of loss settles over you. You're adrift. Your past is gone, erased by the horizon. Your future is an unknown, terrifying void. There is only the small, fragile, creaking world of wood and rope. A tiny, insignificant speck on an immense and indifferent ocean. As the ship begins to rise and fall on the open sea swells, a new sensation makes it known to you. It is a deep, churning nausea in the pit of your stomach, the first unwelcome stirrings of seasickness. The journey, the true ordeal, has just begun.
You do not have long to contemplate the loss of your homeland. The sea makes its presence known, quickly and brutally. The gentle rolling of the ship in the protected channel gives way to a more violent, unpredictable motion as you reach the open Atlantic. The ship rises high on the crest of a gray swell, hanging for a moment in the air before plunging down into the trough with a sickening, stomach-churning drop. Then it rises again, and again, an endless, nauseating rhythm. Your legs, accustomed to the solid, unmoving earth, struggle to find their balance on the constantly shifting deck. You feel a cold sweat break out on your forehead. The world seems to tilt and spin around you. A deep, unpleasant churning begins in the pit of your stomach. It is seasickness, and it is a misery unlike any you have ever known. You stumble back towards the hatchway and make your way down into the tween deck. The atmosphere below, which was merely oppressive before, is now a vision of hell. The motion of the ship is magnified down here, and the lack of a horizon to fix your eyes on makes the vertigo 100 times worse. The air is thick with the sound of retching and the groans of your fellow passengers. In the dim, swinging lamplight, you can see pale, sweating faces, people clutching their stomachs, their bodies curled in misery. You find your small wooden bunk and collapse onto it. The nausea is overwhelming. You have nothing in your stomach but the small piece of bread you ate that morning, but your body is convinced it needs to be emptied. The next hours, and then days, become a blur of wretchedness. You lie on your hard wooden shelf, your body weak and trembling, as wave after wave of nausea washes over you. You are too sick to eat, too sick to move, too sick even to think. Your entire world is reduced to this small, dark, moving space and the overwhelming misery of your own body. There is no privacy in this suffering. You are surrounded by the sounds and smells of others in the same state. The latrine buckets at the end of the long room are constantly in use, their contents sloshing with the motion of the ship, the stench filling the already foul air. After what feels like an eternity, perhaps 3 or 4 days, the worst of the sickness begins to pass. It is not a sudden recovery, but a slow, grudging retreat. The constant nausea recedes, leaving behind a profound weakness and a deep, gnawing hunger. You are finally able to stomach your first meal at sea. It is a shocking disappointment. A sailor brings down a large wooden bucket of hardtack biscuits and a cask of water. The biscuits are not bread. They are thick,
hard, unleavened wafers made from flour, water, and salt, and baked until they are as hard as stone. To eat one, you must soak it in water for several minutes until it softens into a bland, tasteless paste. You quickly learn that the biscuits are often infested with weevils, small black insects that burrow into the hard bread. The sailors have a grim joke. It is better to eat your biscuit in the dark so you cannot see what you're eating. This, you learn, will be the staple of your diet for the next 2 months. Once the initial incapacitating wave of seasickness subsides, a new reality sets in, the profound and soul-crushing monotony of the voyage. The world for you and the other passengers shrinks to the confines of the tween deck. It is a long, low-ceilinged cavern, a wooden tomb that is both your home and your prison. The ceiling is so low that an average man cannot stand up straight. You must live your life in a permanent stooped posture, your head always slightly bowed, your neck and back in a state of constant low-level ache. The space is filled with the rough wooden bunks, stacked 3 high with only a narrow, crowded corridor running down the center. There is no privacy. You are never alone. You are surrounded day and night by the sounds and smells of 100 other people. Your day is governed not by the sun, which you cannot see from down here, but by the ship's bell and the rhythms of the sailors above your head. There are no real chores for the passengers, no work to occupy your hands or your mind. The day is a vast, empty ocean of time that must be filled. You watch how the others cope. Some, mostly the women, spend their hours in a state of constant quiet industry, mending torn clothes with a precious needle and thread, knitting, or simply picking the weevils out of the daily biscuit ration. Some of the men try to pass the time with games, a simple board game scratched into a piece of wood, or a game of cards played with a greasy, worn-out deck. But these often end in bitter arguments over small wagers. But most, however, do nothing at all. They simply lie on their hard wooden bunks for hours on end, staring up at the dark, curving timbers of the deck above, their faces blank with a mixture of boredom and despair. The lack of activity, combined with the poor diet, makes your body feel weak and sluggish. Your muscles, once hard from a life of labor, begin to feel soft and useless. The air in the tween deck is a foul, stagnant thing. There is no ventilation, save for the single hatchway that leads to the upper deck. In good weather, the hatch is left open, and a small shaft of clean, fresh, salty air is a welcome relief. But in bad weather, when the waves are high, the hatch is sealed shut, and the air below becomes a thick, warm, and almost unbreathable soup of human smells. The only reason to leave the tween deck is to use the heads, the ship's latrines. These are not private rooms, but simple open-sided platforms or chains that jut out from the side of the ship at the bow. To use them, you must leave the relative shelter of the tween deck, climb up to the main deck, and make your way to the front of the ship, exposed to the wind and the spray. It is a precarious and deeply undignified process, and one that most of the passengers avoid as much as possible. The social order of your small floating world quickly establishes itself. The families with small children are given the slightly better bunks in the center of the room, away from the drafts and the dampness of the hull. The single men, like yourself, are relegated to the less desirable spots. Factions form. Friendships are made over a shared biscuit. Enmities are born from a perceived slight. You learn to be quiet, to be observant, to draw as little attention to yourself as possible. You are all trapped in this wooden box together, and a single angry confrontation can fester for weeks in the close, oppressive atmosphere.
The days bleed into one another, each one indistinguishable from the last. Your life is measured by the meager rations that are distributed once a day. A sailor descends the ladder carrying a large sack of hardtack biscuits and a bucket of salted beef or pork. The meat is a welcome change from the endless biscuits, but it is tough, stringy and so saturated with salt that it makes your mouth burn and your thirst a constant torment. The most precious commodity on the ship is water. It is stored in large wooden casks in the hold, and it is strictly rationed. You are allowed a single pint a day. It is not fresh, clear water. After weeks at sea, it has become stale, brackish, and slightly slimy, with a faint, unpleasant taste of the wood from the cask. But it is life. You sip it slowly throughout the day, making it last, every drop a precious jewel. Time itself becomes a strange, fluid thing. Without the sun to mark its passage, the only way to tell the time is by the changing of the watches on the deck above. You learn to recognize the sounds, the 4 bells that mark the end of one 4-hour watch, the shouted commands, the tramp of new feet on the deck. These are the only landmarks in a vast, featureless ocean of time. To combat the crushing boredom, you try to find things to do. You spend hours simply watching the other passengers, learning their habits, their small dramas. You watch the sailors when they come below deck, their faces tanned and weathered, their movements sure and confident in this moving world. They are a different breed of men, at home on this violent, unstable element. They treat you and the other passengers with a mixture of pity and contempt. You are land dwellers, helpless and clumsy in their world. The only true event, the only break in the monotony, is the rare sight of another ship. A cry of "Sail ho!" from the lookout in the crow's nest sends a ripple of excitement through the tween deck. Everyone who is able to rushes to the hatchway, desperate for a glimpse of something, anything new. You see a distant sail on the horizon, another small, lonely speck on the vast emptiness. Is it a friendly merchant ship, or is it a pirate, a Spanish man-of-war? For a few hours, a new, more immediate fear replaces the dull ache of boredom. But the other ship always passes, a silent ghost on the horizon, and you're left once more to your own small, self-contained world. As the weeks wear on, you feel your body changing. The lack of fresh food, the lack of exercise, the lack of sunlight, they all take their toll. Your skin becomes pale and sallow. You feel a constant low-level fatigue in your limbs. Small cuts and scrapes that would have healed in a day on land now linger for weeks, refusing to close. You are no longer the strong, healthy young man who boarded the ship. You're becoming a creature of the tween deck, a pale, listless shadow. Your life stripped down to its most basic animal functions: eating, sleeping, and waiting. Waiting for the endless, gray, heaving ocean to finally, mercifully, come to an end.
The third week at sea begins, and with it, a new and more profound stage of your journey. The initial shock and the misery of seasickness have passed. Now you must face a new enemy, a more subtle and insidious one: the crushing, soul-destroying monotony of the open ocean. You have lost sight of land completely. Your world is now a perfect, unbroken circle of gray-blue water, meeting a perfect, unbroken circle of gray-blue sky. There are no landmarks, no islands, no distant coastlines. Every direction looks exactly the same. The ship, which once felt like a vessel of passage, now feels like your entire universe, a small, self-contained, and inescapable world. The days bleed into one another, each one a perfect, featureless copy of the one before. The routine is the only thing that gives the day any shape, a thin, fragile skeleton of order in a vast, chaotic emptiness. You wake in the dark. You eat your meager ration of biscuit and salted meat. You sit or lie in the dim, stuffy confines of the tween deck. You listen to the same conversations, the same complaints, the same prayers. You eat your evening meal. You try to sleep. And then you wake and do it all again. The weather itself is monotonous. For days on end, the wind is a steady, constant force from the west, pushing you, slowly, relentlessly, towards your destination.
The sky is a uniform, overcast gray. The sea is a landscape of endless, rolling, gray-green swells. The ship rises and falls, with a rhythm that is so constant, so predictable, that it becomes a part of your own heartbeat. To combat the crushing boredom, you find small, meaningless tasks to occupy your time. You spend an entire morning meticulously picking the weevils out of a single hardtack biscuit, lining them up on the rough wood of your bunk, a small, grim collection of tiny black insects. You take a small piece of wood and a knife, and you begin to carve, not with any artistic intent, but simply to feel the resistance of the wood, to see the shavings curl away, a small, tangible sign that you are still capable of acting upon the world. You spend hours watching the sailors. You learn to recognize the different ropes, the different sails. You learn the names of the masts, the foremast, the mainmast, the mizzenmast. You learn that the sailors are not a single group, but a tribe with its own complex hierarchy, its own rituals, its own language. They're at home in this world of constant motion and imminent danger. They move with a sure-footed grace on the wet, pitching deck, their bodies accustomed to the rhythm of the sea. They look at you and the other passengers with a kind of weary disdain. You are cargo. You are a liability. You do not belong in their world. You begin to lose your sense of yourself. On land, you were a farmer or a laborer. You had a purpose, a function. Here, you are nothing. You do not work. You do not create. You simply exist. You are a passenger, a piece of human freight being carried across the ocean. Your own identity, the story of who you are, begins to feel thin and unreal, a distant memory from another life. The monotony of the journey is reflected in the monotony of your diet. Food is not a source of pleasure. It is a grim, daily ritual of sustenance, a battle against the ever-present threat of starvation. The hardtack biscuits remain the foundation of every meal. You learn the best way to eat them, to break them into small pieces with a stone or a piece of iron, and then to soak them in your daily ration of water until they become a soft, flavorless mush. The weevils are a constant presence. At first you meticulously pick them out, but after weeks at sea, a kind of weary acceptance sets in. They are just another small, unwelcome source of protein. The salted meat, whether it is beef or pork, is served 2 or 3 times a week. It comes from the great, brine-filled barrels in the cargo hold. It is tough as old leather, and so saturated with salt that it makes your tongue and gums sting. It is a struggle to chew and to swallow, and it leaves you with a raging, unquenchable thirst that your small water ration can do little to soothe. The water itself is a slow creeping horror. The fresh, clean water that filled the casks at the start of the voyage is long gone. Now the water that is doled out each day is stale and stagnant. It has a brownish, murky color, and a slimy film often coats the surface. It smells of rot and old wood, but it is all you have. You learn to drink it with your eyes closed, to ignore the taste, to focus only on the life-giving moisture. As the weeks turn into a month, and then more, you begin to notice the slow, insidious effects of this diet on your body. You feel a profound and constant lethargy. Your joints begin to ache. You notice that your gums are becoming soft and tender, and they sometimes bleed when you chew the hard biscuit. Small cuts and scrapes that would have healed in a day on land now linger through weeks, refusing to close, sometimes turning into angry, weeping sores. You see the same signs of decay in the other passengers. Their skin becomes pale and sallow. Their eyes seem to sink deeper into their faces. A terrible, quiet lethargy settles over the tween deck. The few games of cards die out. The conversations become fewer, replaced by a shared, silent endurance. The greatest fear is not of a sudden, violent death from a storm, but of a slow, creeping death from disease. Scurvy, the sailor's plague, is a constant, unspoken terror. You hear the sailors whispering about it, about the telltale signs, the bleeding gums, the loose teeth,
the old scars that mysteriously reopen. Another fear is of ship fever, or typhus, spread by the lice that infest every bunk and every piece of clothing. When a passenger begins to cough, a dry, racking cough that shakes their entire body, the others subtly move away, a small, selfish act of self-preservation. You are all trapped in this wooden world, a world of slow decay, of dwindling supplies, and of a creeping, ever-present sickness. The beautiful promise of the new world, the dream that sustained you through the first hard weeks, now seems like a distant, cruel joke. Your only goal, your only prayer, is to see land. Any land. To feel the solid, unmoving earth beneath your feet once more before the rot of the ship consumes you entirely.
The only event that can break the spell of the endless gray monotony is the sight of another living thing. Sometimes it is a school of dolphins, their sleek gray bodies arcing gracefully out of the water, following the ship for an hour or two. The first time it happens, a cry goes up in the tween deck, and everyone who is able rushes to the hatchway, desperate for a glimpse. It is a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy, a reminder that the world is not entirely empty, that life still exists beyond the creaking timbers of your wooden prison. Other times, the sight is less joyful, more menacing. The fin of a great shark, a dark triangular blade, cutting silently through the water alongside the ship. It follows you for a day, a silent, patient predator, a grim reminder of the violent, unforgiving world that lies just a few inches of wood away from you. The most significant event is the cry from the lookout in the crow's nest high above the deck. "Sail ho!" A ripple of excitement and fear runs through the tween deck. Everyone who is able makes their way to the main deck, their eyes scanning the horizon. You see it. A distant sail. Another small, lonely speck on the vast emptiness. Is it the friendly merchant ship? Another vessel filled with hopefuls like yourself? Or is it something more dangerous? A pirate ship, a Spanish man-of-war. For a few hours, a new, more immediate fear replaces the dull ache of boredom. The captain orders the cannons to be readied. The sailors move with a new, grim purpose. You and the other passengers are ordered to stay below, and the hatch is sealed, plunging you into a tense, fearful darkness. You can hear the frantic shouted commands from the deck above, the running of booted feet. You sit in the dark, your heart pounding, imagining a battle. The roar of cannons, the splintering of wood, the screams of men. But the other ship always passes, a silent ghost on the horizon, its intentions unknown. The alarm is called off, the hatch is reopened, the tension subsides, leaving behind a familiar, weary exhaustion. The brief, terrifying interruption is over, and you are left once more to your own small, self-contained world, a world of boredom, of hunger, and of slow creeping decay. The endless, gray, heaving ocean continues, indifferent to your small dramas, your fears, and your hopes. After a month at sea, the true, invisible threats of the voyage begin to manifest. The danger is no longer the abstract fear of the unknown, but a real and present and terrifying reality within the confines of the ship. It begins with the children. They're the weakest, the most vulnerable. A young boy, no older than 7, begins to cough. At first it is a small, dry cough, easily dismissed, but it does not go away. It worsens, becoming a deep, racking cough that shakes his entire small body. A fever sets in. His mother tries to comfort him, to cool his forehead with a damp rag, but there is nothing she can do. The ship has no doctor, only a ship's carpenter, who also serves as a crude surgeon, his knowledge limited to amputations and the stitching of wounds. The other passengers in the tween deck watch with a mixture of pity and a cold, primal fear. They subtly, almost unconsciously, create a small, empty space around the sick boy and his family. Sickness in this cramped, airless environment is a terrifying prospect. It is a fire that once started could easily consume them all.
You watch the boy's slow decline. You see the hope in his mother's eyes slowly curdle into a dull, resigned despair. One morning, you wake to the sound of her quiet, heartbroken weeping. The boy's small, still form is wrapped in a piece of sailcloth. The next day, there is a brief, simple ceremony on the main deck. The captain says a few words from the Bible. The small white bundle is given to the sea, disappearing in an instant into the gray, churning water. There is no grave. There is no marker. There is only the vast, empty ocean and a silence in the tween deck that is heavier and more oppressive than ever before. The boy's death is a grim omen, a reminder of their own fragility. A new kind of fear takes root among the passengers. It is not the fear of a sudden violent end, but a slow, creeping, and invisible decay. Soon the sickness begins to appear among the adults. It is not the cough that took the boy, but something else, something even more insidious. You see a man, a strong, healthy farmer, complaining of a deep weariness in his limbs. A few days later, you notice that his gums are swollen and a dark purplish color. When he eats his hard biscuit, they bleed freely. Old scars on his arms, long since healed, mysteriously begin to reopen, turning into weeping sores. It is scurvy, the plague of the sea. No one knows what causes it. Some say it's the foul air of the ship. Others say it's a punishment from God. No one understands that it is simply a lack of fresh food, of the vital nutrients that keep the body from falling apart. You watch him grow weaker, day by day. He can no longer leave his bunk. His teeth begin to loosen in their sockets. A profound, deep-seated ache settles into his bones. His despair is a quiet, tangible thing. He knows, as everyone knows, that there is no cure for this sickness at sea. There is only one remedy: land. And the land is still many weeks away.
The presence of sickness and death in the cramped confines of the tween deck changes the very atmosphere of your small floating world. The quiet, monotonous boredom of the first month is replaced by a quiet, gnawing anxiety. Every cough, every groan in the night is a potential sign that the sickness is spreading. You begin to watch your own body with a new, fearful attention. Is that a new ache in your joints? Are your own gums a little tender today? The social bonds that had begun to form between the passengers start to fray. Trust is replaced by suspicion. A quiet, unspoken fear of contagion creates invisible walls between the bunks. People become more withdrawn, more isolated in their own private misery. The few shared games of cards cease entirely. The quiet conversations die out. The tween deck becomes a place of silent, individual endurance. The only communal activity that remains is prayer. Every evening, a small group of the most devout passengers gathers in the center of the room, their voices a low, monotonous murmur as they recite the Psalms. But even their prayers have changed. The hopeful prayers for a safe and swift passage have been replaced with grim, desperate pleas for deliverance from sickness and death. You begin to notice the toll that the journey is taking on the minds of your fellow passengers. You see people having long, whispered conversations with themselves. You see a woman who spends her entire day rocking back and forth on her bunk, her eyes wide and vacant. The lack of sunlight, the poor diet, the constant fear, and the profound, unending monotony, it is a perfect recipe for a slow, creeping madness. You too feel the strain on your own mind. The promise of Virginia, the vibrant, hopeful dream that sustained you, now seems like a distant, childish fantasy. It is difficult to remember the green of the trees, the smell of the earth, the feeling of the solid, unmoving ground beneath your feet. Your entire reality has become this gray, heaving world of water and wood and sickness. Despair is a quiet, creeping thing. It does not come with a great dramatic flourish. It comes in the small moments.
The moment you bite into a biscuit and see that it is riddled with more weevils than flour. The moment you see another small sailcloth-wrapped bundle dropped into the endless, indifferent ocean. The moment you realize that you have not seen the sun in over a week and you have forgotten what it feels like to be warm. The hope that drove you to take this desperate gamble is a flickering, dying ember. Your only goal now, your only prayer, is not for a new life, not for prosperity, but simply for an end to this voyage. An end, one way or another. For what feels like an eternity, the ship has been trapped in a dead calm. The sails hang limp and useless. The sea is a flat, gray, oily sheet stretching to an empty horizon. The sun is a pale, hazy disk in a white, oppressive sky. For days, the ship has barely moved, drifting aimlessly on the current. The heat in the tween deck has become a suffocating, tangible thing, and the water ration has been cut in half. A new, more immediate fear has taken root, the fear of being stranded here forever, a ghost ship in a windless sea. Then, one afternoon, the change begins. It is not a sudden event, but a slow, ominous gathering of forces. A dark, bruised-looking cloud appears on the western horizon. The air, which has been still and heavy for days, begins to stir with a strange, nervous energy. The sailors on the deck above begin to move with a new urgency, their voices sharp and commanding. You hear the sound of ropes being tightened, of heavy canvas being furled. You and the other passengers who were able to make your way to the hatchway, your own faces filled with a mixture of fear and a strange, desperate hope. Anything, even a storm, feels better than this endless, suffocating calm. The line of clouds grows with an unnatural speed, swallowing the pale sky, turning the world a dark, greenish gray. The wind, which was a gentle breeze a moment ago, is now a low, mournful moan in the rigging. The sea, once flat and placid, is now agitated, its surface covered with a million tiny, nervous ripples. You are herded back down into the tween deck, and the heavy wooden hatch is slammed shut, plunging you into an almost total darkness, a darkness lit only by a single, wildly swinging lantern. The sounds from the world above are now muffled, but somehow more terrifying. You can hear the frantic, running footsteps of the sailors on the deck, the shriek of the wind, and a new sound, a deep, low, rumbling roar, like some great beast awakening from the depths of the ocean. The ship gives its first great lurch, not the familiar gentle roll, but a violent, sickening heave that sends a number of the passengers already weak from hunger and sickness sprawling across the floor. The storm has arrived.
The world is reduced to a symphony of terrifying sounds, a chaotic orchestra of destruction. The low moan of the wind has risen to a high, piercing shriek, a sound of pure, elemental fury that seems to get inside your very bones. You can hear the roar of the waves, not as a distant sound, but as a series of massive, liquid explosions against the wooden hull of the ship, just inches from your head. With each impact, the entire vessel shudders, a deep, violent tremor that feels as if the ship is being struck by a giant's hammer. The motion is unlike anything you have experienced before. The ship is no longer rising and falling, it is being thrown. It is lifted up a seemingly impossible height, hanging for a terrifying, weightless moment at the crest of a monstrous wave, before plunging down, down, down into a deep, black trough, your stomach leaping into your throat. Then it is rolled violently to one side, the angle so steep that you must cling to the posts of your bunk to keep from being thrown across the room. In the dim, swinging light of the single lantern, the tween deck is a scene of pure chaos and terror. Loose objects, a wooden bucket, a stray cup, a small chest, slide and crash across the floor with every roll of the ship.
The people who are not in their bunks are thrown about like rag dolls, their cries of pain and fear adding to the cacophony. The sound of the ship itself is perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. The wooden timbers, which have been your entire world for months, are now screaming in protest against the immense forces trying to tear them apart. You hear a constant, deep groaning sound, the sound of wood being twisted beyond its limits. You hear the sharp cracking sound of a rope or a piece of rigging snapping on the deck above. You hear the thunderous boom of a great wave crashing over the main deck, a sound that tells you that the ocean is no longer below you, but above you. Water begins to find its way through the sealed hatches and the small cracks in the deck. It is not a flood, but a steady, cold trickle of seawater that runs down the walls and drips from the ceiling, a constant, chilling reminder of the violent, angry ocean that is trying to get in. There is nothing to do but endure. You lie in your bunk, your knuckles white as you grip the rough, splintery wood. You are a prisoner in a wooden box being shaken by a giant. Every creak, every groan of the ship you are certain will be its last. You imagine the wood splintering, the cold black water rushing in, the final suffocating moments of your life. The hours pass in this state of heightened, abject terror. The other passengers are a chorus of fear around you. Some are praying, their voices a desperate, chanting litany. Others are weeping. Some are simply silent, their faces a pale, numbed mask of shock. In this moment, all of the small, petty concerns of your life, your hunger, your boredom, your future in the new world, are burned away by the pure, primal, all-consuming fear of imminent death. There is only the storm, the darkness, and the terrifyingly fragile thinness of the wooden hull that separates you from the cold, violent oblivion of the sea. The storm, like all things, eventually exhausts itself. The violent, wrenching motion of the ship begins to subside, replaced by a deep, weary rolling. The shrieking of the wind dies down to a low, mournful moan, and then finally to a quiet whisper. The thunderous roar of the waves is replaced by a steady, rhythmic lapping against the hull. After what feels like an eternity of darkness and terror, the hatch to the tween deck is unbolted and pushed open. A rectangle of pale gray daylight spills down the ladder, a sight so welcome, so beautiful, it is almost painful to look at. The air that follows is the freshest, cleanest, sweetest air you have ever tasted in your life. You and the other survivors, pale and trembling, slowly, stiffly make your way out of the foul, dark confines of the tween deck and up onto the main deck. The world is a wreck. The deck is slick with seawater and littered with the debris of the storm. A splintered piece of a mast, a tangled mess of broken ropes, one of the ship's small boats has been smashed to pieces. But the ship is intact. The masts are standing. You have survived. A few days of calm follow, a period of quiet, exhausted recovery, but there is a new feeling in the air, a new hope. The sailors say the storm, for all its fury, has pushed you far to the west. They say you are close. Then, one morning, you are awakened not by the changing of the watch, but by a new sound, a single, powerful, joyous cry from the lookout high above in the crow's nest. "Land ho!" The words are electric. A surge of pure, unadulterated joy rushes through you. You join the other passengers in a frantic, stumbling rush to the side of the ship, your eyes scanning the western horizon. At first, you see nothing. Only the familiar, empty line where the gray sea meets the gray sky. But then you see it. It is not a grand coastline. It is not a towering cliff. It is just a low, dark, almost imperceptible smudge on the horizon, a line that is slightly thicker, slightly darker than the rest. It could be a cloud, but it does not move. It is land, a quiet, Profound and deeply emotional silence falls over the passengers. Some begin to weep openly, tears of relief and exhaustion streaming down their thin, sallow faces. Others are simply staring, their mouths agape, unable to process the sight. Over the course of the day, the smudge on the horizon grows. It becomes a line, then a shape. You begin to make out the details. It is a coastline, low and green. You can see the dark, dense green of a forest, a green so vibrant and alive it almost hurts your eyes after months of staring at the gray sea. You can smell it, a faint, almost imaginary scent on the wind. It is the smell of damp earth, of pine trees, of living, growing things. It is the smell of home. The long, hellish voyage is over. You have crossed the ocean. You have survived the sickness, the hunger, the despair, and the storm. You have arrived. You look out at the dark, wild, and unknown coastline of the New World, a new, equally difficult struggle, the struggle to survive in this new land, is about to begin. But, for now, in this single, perfect moment, there is only an overwhelming, all-consuming sense of relief. You have made it. You are alive.